Okay.
What's
Hi.
today's presentation called, guys?
Good morning. It's called Freight Systems. What would you call it?
Probably, Easton's the best. Mason has it.
All right. Hi, everyone. Couple things here. First off, this is your one friendly reminder that phones need to get put away in your pockets. I should not see them at all during the duration of the entire hour. Earbuds should also be taken out of your ears, so that way you can't be listening to whatever from your phone in your pocket while I'm giving the presentation. So thank you.
Why do you only say that when you're
Backpacks should also be on the ground, so that way I can see what's on your desk in front of you. Okay. I would like to start off today by telling you a little story. This story has a very specific context for something that we're going to be doing.
Is it the Little Red Hen?
No.
Is
This
it a
is a
fairy
personal
tale?
story. This is a personal story.
Is it
Okay?
fiction or non-fiction?
Let's just pay attention. No, it's real. Now, back in the day when I was in 8th grade, I had an absolutely amazing social studies / U.S. history teacher. He was an old Navy veteran, and
Mr. Kikurio.
hi, Easton. In order for you to appear intelligent, I need you to be quiet and just listen.
Was that him?
Anyways, what was really interesting is he was an old Navy vet and he loved history. And the guy knew so much about U.S. history. He would tell us stories about how he'd go to like these reenacting places, right, where people would like dress up as George Washington, and he'd go up to these people and start asking them questions, and they had no idea about anything George Washington, like stuff that you could not like normally find in a textbook. Anyways, I admired the guy a lot, and he was easily one of my top 5 favorite teachers of all time. Anyways, the reason why I say that is because he always handed out an assignment for every unit that we did, and he called it a goodie. Okay, that was the name of the assignment, a goodie. Do you know why he called it a goodie? Because every time that he handed it out, the students, including me, would say, "Oh, goodie."
That's embarrassing.
Like literally that. So he's like, "Hey, I'm just gonna call it a goodie." And it was literally a packet of information that we had to go through for the duration of the unit, and like fill out questions and answers and notes, and then he actually had us take the front cover sheet, and we had to like draw a picture and color it for like bonus points and stuff, and we had to hand that in, and that was a major part of our grade. But it was like a lot of stuff to go through and do, right? But it was our homework. So, in hopes that I am going to attempt to try to figure out a better way to be able to allow you guys to learn the material, I'm going to give you my goodie. Yeah. So this is going to be sort of fun. Now, again, this is not going to take place of your notes that you're going to follow along with me today. But this is going to be essentially your study guide for the test for this stuff.
Do you
Okay?
still have a normal study guide?
This is the study guide. So what I'm about to hand out to you, I'm going to hand it out to you today, so you can have it. Here's a couple things that you're going to personally enjoy. Okay. First and foremost, the study guide will not be graded.
This
What,
one?
for real?
You will not be handing it in to me.
Yes.
Isn't that exciting?
What is it?
Awesome
Study
sauce.
guide.
Okay.
YouTube.
Second of all, you can use the study guide on the test.
What?
That means nothing on the study.
Mr. Gates,
Okay.
how'd you get so awesome?
Okay.
That's
Not only can you use this study guide for on the test, but you'll also be able to use it on the formative assessments. Okay, which I'll show you what that looks like later on. All right. So whether you do it or not is totally up to you. Okay. I would highly recommend that you would end up doing it because it's going to be very, very beneficial for you. Okay. At the same point in time, we have to understand that there's still going to be 4 days assignments, like the brake system principles that is going to be assigned to you starting today. It's due Friday, so you go into 4 days, you do the thing, once you go through the lesson, you go into Google Form, open it up, take the quiz, submit, you get the points for that, okay? Some of the information on this study guide is going to not, there's going to be information on this study guide that's not going to be presented to you. It's going to be found in 4 days. So feel free to like work on the study guide as you're going through 4 days, because that can help you obviously with a bunch of things later on. Okay? So I'm going to see kind of where we're at with this particular unit, and I hope that this will actually be a positive step forward, where we can see more students find success on the information that we're going to be covering over the next probably 2 weeks or so outside of the lab. Okay? Yes, Simon.
How big is this 4 days assignment this week? Okay.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I don't know how many slides. There's gonna be four days assignments, but those are gonna be the last 4 days assignments of the school year. So 1 per week, and then we'll go from there.
There's like a month left at school.
Okay.
Like a month.
Little bit more than that.
Month and 2
Okay,
months.
let's hand out this goodie.
57.
Oh, I should mention this.
57.
Very, 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 very important. I want to mention this to make sure it's crystal clear. Okay? I printed off these. There is no digital copy that's going to be made available to you. And you only get 1 of these. So that means if you lose it, or it gets damaged or ruined, that's on you. It is not my responsibility to replace this. Okay? So just throwing that out there. This is your one and only copy.
Why does it say goodie on the top?
Did I make all this?
No, the AI did it, bro.
Definitely.
Yeah,
No way, I'm trying to put it in my.
There's a lot. Mr. Getty, there's no way you go through, you like grade like 100 of these.
That's why this is not graded.
Oh, so
That makes sense. Yep.
I thought this was the video.
Oh.
Because I am not trying to hide.
Isn't this the video?
This is the goodie.
But it's not graded.
It's not graded.
So if you do better on the test, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to.
You gotta reach on the Hey, I think I'm doing that.
Okay.
Let me guess, you printed this right off the study guide you made years ago?
No. No, there was,
He screenshotted it all.
yeah, just totally screenshot it. Okay, with that being said, I don't think there's really anything else I need to add to that. We're just gonna go ahead and jump into this right now.
Let's get into our next video.
Not the video. This is gonna end up being our slideshow presentation. All right, it is up and running. What do you mean? That was my intro. All right.
Taking our normal notes.
Normal notes, notebooks. This is going to be information you're going to want to write down because it's going to be not only relevant for information to learn how to do the tasks that we're going to be doing on the shop, right? We want to develop skills for you to use. But it's also going to be very relevant for obviously tests and homework assignments. And
This is our last unit.
This is our last unit.
Oh, damn. That's actually kind of crazy.
This is our last unit, braking systems. Brakes. And again, as you are getting your notebook out and getting it to a fresh sheet of paper, I do want to iterate that the 4 days assignment is specifically assigned in conjunction with what we're going to be going over to help reinforce what we're going to be talking about. But again, I do want to emphasize that the 4 days has better animations. They might have some videos and stuff that will explain visually probably better than what I can do off of my Google slideshow, okay? But I don't want you going into 4 days being like overwhelmed with stuff, so we're going to introduce to you guys terms and thoughts and like how the systems operate, so then that way you can go into that and go, okay, this is somewhat familiar, let's build off of what we already kind of are working on. All right, with that said, just like with any notes, because I know it's been a couple weeks since we've been doing notes, upper right hand corner, name, date, today's the 14th of April. And then up at the top, you are going to write down one essential question. Okay? Your essential question is like the king of questions when it comes to this unit. It should be linked up with one of the standards that you see currently on the screen. Okay, so the standards we have are A5, A2. We're going to be talking about and identifying brake system components and configurations. On this particular slide, or excuse me, presentation, we're also going to touch base on A5, B4, which means that you are going to inspect brake lines, flexible hoses, fittings for leaks, dents, kinks, rust, cracks, bulging, wear, and loose fittings or supports. And then, of course, A5, B8, you are going to, in the lab, when we eventually get out there, test brake fluid for contamination. So you are tasked with the very simple thought process of coming up with a question, who, what, why, when, where, how, that's going to hit on one of those three standards. Okay, and again, it could be any question that you want, that you think is very important. If you write a question based off of these three things, we are going to answer it. Okay?
So, actually, my notebook is full.
Okay, cool. You need an extra piece of paper?
No, I got it.
Okay. Okay. A full notebook is a good thing.
Well, actually, you make me write so much that you fill the whole notebook, so.
Oh man, you're making me super happy there, Houston.
See, there's like
Now, during the duration of the presentation, obviously you know what you wrote, or you are currently writing down as your essential question. If there's any information that we're going to be talking about that links up with your essential question, by all means, feel free to write down that information, maybe underline it, figure out a way to highlight it, so that way when you come back in and give me a summary of your notes, you have that information readily available. Okay, and you can pick up on that and then give me a better summary. Okay. Again, some low-hanging fruit for questions like, what is brake fluid? You know, what's different about brake fluid? Could you use something other than brake fluid? How does brake fluid get contaminated? What are the contaminants considered to be in brake fluid? How do brake lines leak? Right? Where would a flexible hose be in a brake system? Let's see here. What are three components of a brake system? Okay, those are all very low-hanging fruit that we're probably going to be able to get into and answer because, again, it's based off of standards. But you only need one essential question.
Today's the 14th, right?
14th of April. Okay, again, I'm not going to make you draw this, but if you look in the packet that I just handed out to you, you probably are going to find somewhere on the back page something very similar to what you see here. Okay? And again, we are going to be going in and we are going to be naming these things as we go through the presentation. So again, it's not a bad thing necessarily to have this packet with you and alongside your notes. So that way, as we're going in, you can write that stuff down or identify it. Okay. So we are going to touch base a little bit during this presentation on disc brakes, but we're really going to be saving the meat and potatoes of disc brakes for a different presentation because we're going to go much more in depth with these components here. This presentation is really just highlighting all of the systems between your foot hitting the brake pedal to the actual brakes. Okay, so what's in between the brake pedal and the actual brakes themselves? How does that work? That's today's presentation. Okay, yeah, we'll go with that one. Okay, and then obviously down the road we're gonna just hyper focus in on these components that are actually attached to your wheel hub and wheels and are the ones producing the ability to slow down and stop. Okay. So again, if you don't necessarily know where these are located at on that particular packet right now, no worries, we'll cover that later on. If we don't cover it, it is then your responsibility to find that information out. Yay, learning outside of school, who would have thought? All right, we got a combination valve, a brake master cylinder, a brake booster, brake pedal, parking brake, and brake lines. That should be plural because there's more than one.
So actually, my
Okay.
diagram does not look anything like that.
Yeah, you have to, well, that's because that particular diagram's the wrong diagram.
That one shows the disc brakes.
Yeah, so why don't you open up to the back side of that sheet of
Maybe
paper.
show me on the back side.
There we go.
Oh, look at that.
I know.
It still looks slightly different.
It is going to look slightly different because guess what? Not everything's cookie cutter in the world of automotive.
Actually, I bet I could just find the diagram that this is.
But that's the whole idea. I want to challenge you to be able to not just memorize, oh, the purple thing is the brake booster. Right? Because brake boosters are going to look different on vehicles.
Okay, this is going to be a
Okay.
headache, which is color coded and mine's not.
Oh, then guess what you can do, Easton?
I can't color.
You can color. It's like kindergarten. Man, it's like going back to 8th grade with Mr. Fable's goodie. All right. Here's some acronyms or abbreviations.
I'm going to ChatGPT for this.
Commonly, yeah, good luck with that. By the way, there's some information on the front page of the study guide that I'm not covering. You're going to want to read it. Guaranteed you're going to want to read that because it's going to outline a whole bunch of expectations about this particular packet.
Oh, for real?
Okay.
Frickin' packet, yo.
Again, I'm not spending time talking about that in class because you have the ability to read. You're in high school. If you choose not to read, that's on you, but you're still responsible for what it contains. All right, DOT, Department of Transportation. Woo, government. Okay, we have a Wisconsin DOT. ABS, probably familiar 3-letter acronym in automobile stuff that you might be familiar with, anti-lock braking system. Okay, if you don't know what anti-lock brakes are, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how that mechanism actually functions. It's very cool, actually. And you hopefully don't need to use it, but if you do, it's there. And it's actually more good for than just braking, too. TCS, traction control system. RWAL, WAL, rear wheel anti-lock brake system. And then ATC, automatic traction control. So these are abbreviations, acronyms, whatever you want to call it, that we're going to be referencing throughout the presentation. So if at any point in time I talk about TCS and you have no idea or forgot what TCS is, look in your notes. You have it defined for you. Okay? Trying to create a little mind map for you.
Let's see, I do believe somebody's at the door.
Is there? I didn't hear anything.
I thought I did, but
Although
I
I'm-
could have sworn I did too.
I'm deaf in both my eyeballs.
Yeah, so actually,
Hey,
your
sorry.
eyes don't fucking lie.
There you go.
Mason, you should be ready to use down on this.
Oh.
I can name the 3.
All right, we're good?
No.
No? Oh my goodness. Mr. Geske, my hand's cramping. I haven't written this much in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I definitely do the most writing in here.
Oh man, that is a compliment. Also an insult to other classes that you should be writing in.
Yeah, I do. I can't remember the last time we wrote English class.
Yeah.
When's the last time we wrote in English?
You know, I'll just, while you guys are finishing this, I'll key you in on a little aggravation that I was talking with my wife the other day about.
Aggravation?
Yeah, a frustration on my end as a teacher. But I'm aggravated about this because it's something that I see and I shouldn't see. It's the inability of students to be able to actually read and write effectively. I don't know necessarily how to say this. I'm embarrassed for you. I'm reading like study guide stuff. I'm reading like just things that high school students are writing for their assignments for my class, and it's like my head hurts.
Oh, that's not nice.
Well, it's not meant to be nice. It's the truth, right? I'm not going to come up here and sugarcoat it. And I think the main reason why that students' skill level is so low at reading and writing is because we don't make you read and write.
I don't remember the last time I had to like read.
Yeah, because most people aren't going to read because they're going to go to ChatGPT and just say, hey, summarize this for me, right? You're taking shortcuts, right? Students tend to do that. They want to do as little work as possible. They want to take shortcuts. Instead of taking 4 hours to read a book, they're going to say, I'm just going to take 15 minutes to summarize it, and that'll be good enough. Unfortunately, you're shortchanging yourself on the skills that you're needing to be developing in order to function. Right? If you want to learn, you got to read. If you can't read because you don't have the skill set to read or the tolerance level to be able to sit down for an hour to read, you're hurting yourself. So again, it's frustrating for me as a teacher because I want you to sit down and I want you to read, review things, and students, I get a lot of pushback from kids. Oh, that's too much, Mr. Getsky. It's too hard. No, it's not. You're just weak. Your skill set is weak.
Not me.
Because you're not forced to do it.
You guys can watch me read. Like half his mindset of wine. I'm done.
Bro, that was impressive. Good. All right, what is the overarching idea behind braking systems? Why do we have them on our cars? So you don't hit a wall, so you don't hit a child, so you don't hit a deer.
Yeah.
Okay? Although there are some of you in here that are probably thinking to yourself, you know what, Mr. Getsky, I'm going to have the high score at some point in time. Okay, that's not the goal of braking. Okay, automotive brake systems.
Getsky, have you? Sorry, just a little off topic with the brakes, but like, have you ever seen anybody that didn't know that you can flip your brights forward and they stayed on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it a guy?
No.
Okay.
It wasn't. No, it was. It's not what I meant to answer. No.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you. It's just people in general. Okay? All right. Anyways, we got to do this because we got a short period of time, and I don't want to spend 3 weeks doing this.
You got to tell us about it, right?
Automotive brake systems use friction to stop, slow, or hold the wheels from turning.
What do you mean by that?
Okay? In most cases, this entire school year, we've been talking about how we don't want friction. Right? In our engine, we have a lubrication system to put oil to high friction parts because we don't want friction. We want it to be able to rotate easily so that way we don't actually waste energy. Right?
Facts.
Okay? Braking systems, we do want friction.
And hence.
Okay? If we lubricate our brakes, they will not work. Okay? So this is kind of one of those things where this is a time where we actually want to generate friction. Okay? Now, I'm gonna blow your mind a little bit here. We're gonna take this to the next level. Okay? It's not about friction per se. It's about transferring energy from one energy type to a different type of energy type. Okay? So again, let me just draw this on the board, right? If I've got a tire or a wheel or on a car that's going in a circle, right? It's moving. What kind of energy is that?
Kinetic.
Kinetic energy, right? I'm moving and I'm going down the road. I have kinetic energy. In physics, in science, you have been taught energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
It can only be transferred.
Okay? It can be transferred. So if I want to stop my rolling wheel, kinetic energy, what do I have to do with that energy? I have to transfer it. Well, what am I transferring it to?
Brakes.
Right? Yeah, what is the brakes doing?
Stopping the wheel.
With what?
Friction.
Friction.
What happens when there's friction?
There's a rod resistance.
Okay? What is going to happen to my braking system?
It's going to eat away at it.
There's going to be wear, sure. What type of energy am I going to be exuding?
Friction.
Which generates No, energy cannot be created or destroyed, so we're not generating energy. We're transferring the kinetic energy to
Your brakes, your pads, your rotors, suspension, wheels, ground, the road, your mug. Damn it.
if I'm driving down the road,
Yep.
Yeah.
right,
And your Toyota full runner.
and I stop at the stop sign,
Yep.
and I get out of my car, and I go up to my brakes, and I touch it, what's going to happen?
Heat. Friction. Heat. Shock.
My brakes are going to be hot. I am going to burn myself.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get out of
Okay.
my car at stop signs and feel my brakes.
So guess what's happening?
You don't do that? I do. That's because you feel I see it.
I'm taking kinetic energy
And you turn it into
that
heat.
is in the wheel and as it's transferring, and I'm transferring that energy from rolling motion to heat through friction.
What?
Okay? Because again, energy cannot be created or destroyed. I'm literally transferring that from one energy type to another type of energy type. Okay? I'm telling you folks right now, most people don't understand this concept. Okay, they just know that when they hit the brake pedal, the brakes are going to stop their car. Okay, they don't understand the underlying scientific principle about how that works. Okay, and if we can understand that we're transferring kinetic energy into heat energy, that's going to allow us to use our brakes better for longer. Okay, we're going to be able to develop materials that can allow us to do things better for longer. Okay, it also is going to allow us to manipulate our energy usage for other various reasons for modern technology. Okay, again, that's a little hint to how EVs, right, electric vehicles work. Right now, in a conventional automobile, there are two common different ways to generate friction in order to slow or stop or hold the wheels. Okay? We have our disc brakes and we have drum brakes. Disc brakes right now are much more common and much more popular.
Which one?
Okay? Disc brakes.
Oh, okay.
Okay? This does not mean that you will ever see a vehicle that doesn't have drum brakes, because drum brakes can still appear on modern day vehicles. Okay? We, throughout the next couple weeks, are going to be really focusing on disc brakes. Because again, that's more common that you are going to encounter. Okay? I'm not going to spend much time on drum brakes. Not because they're not important. It's just a little bit more sophisticated in terms of their operation.
Is it hard? Is harder?
In terms of maintenance, yes. It's gonna, there's more steps to it.
Is it more efficient? Like,
Disc brakes are more efficient in terms of making the vehicle stop.
There's drum brakes.
We'll talk about that.
There's not as many moving components.
Well, on a disc brake, sure. So,
So since we're working with heat, does
yes.
brakes change with temperature of weather? Like if it's a hot outside, it changes how the brakes work versus cold?
Theoretically, yes. But the temperatures that we're dealing with, it's not going to be impactful very long.
Okay.
Like, very minimal.
Okay.
Okay, good question. Okay, front brakes are typically going to do 60 to 70% of the overall braking effort on a vehicle. Okay? 60 to 70% of your braking force stopping power is done by the front brakes. Why? Okay, I can give you the information. Hey, 60 to 70% front brakes. Cool, you can write that down. You can know that. But now let's understand why that is. Because understanding the why is more important than maybe necessarily understanding the what. Yes, Easton.
Is it because your vehicle is moving forward?
Mm-hmm. We talked briefly about this during our steering and suspension systems.
Your back would like
Well, it's because your momentum's moving forward, so your front brakes are gonna gain more than your back brakes.
We're talking physics here, okay? So again, in steering suspension systems, we talked about how during acceleration, right? What's gonna happen is you're at a stop, you're standing still, and you're trying to accelerate, you're going forward. Physics dictates that, right? Well, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, but an object in motion wants to stay in motion, and an object at rest wants to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Okay? So if I'm an object, a truck, let's say, and I'm at a standstill, my truck wants to stay there, physics-wise. So as soon as I start putting acceleration forces on that vehicle, all the weight of that vehicle is going to start to shift rearward, which means my suspension system on the back of my vehicle is now loading up, right? There's more pounds on that, so it squats. Rear suspension drops, front brings up, or goes up, okay?
Wheelie.
It's not a wheelie, it's just, it's the squatting down. But it's happening under acceleration. The opposite is also true. If I'm going 70 miles an hour and I want to stop, all that weight on my vehicle is now going to shift forward, causing my suspension system on the front to be loaded up. It's going to start to compress, right? Which means I have more weight on the front brake systems,
It's under more stress.
which means I need to have bigger brakes to handle that load, dynamic load that's occurring under braking. So this is why your front brakes are typically larger and more powerful than your rear brakes, because they have to handle a greater dynamic load that's happening on the vehicle as it's braking. Okay? Now, we'll get more into this later on, but heat, again, we're taking kinetic energy and we're transferring it to heat energy. Okay? That heat needs to dissipate, right, as quickly as possible. Because the faster we can dissipate that heat into the environment, the more braking that can happen. Okay, the more braking that can occur on my vehicle. There could be potentially a point in time where my metal on my brake system has been saturated with so much heat that it can no longer take any more heat. At that point in time, your brakes don't work. You can push on that brake pedal as much as you want. Because it's full of heat, we can't add any more, thus you're not stopping any slower. Okay? This is what's called brake fade or heat fade. All right, we have to be very mindful of that. Now, under normal driving conditions out in the real world on streets, it's a very rare occurrence. Okay, but if I'm in a sports car, right, and I'm trying to go around a lap as fast as possible, I'm going to be hitting my brakes often and as hard as possible. I'm going to be generating a lot of heat, and there's probably not a lot of time between my brakes being used to allow those to cool down enough to be able to use them. So now I have to over-engineer stuff. I have to put ducts directing airflow into my brake systems, right, to allow that heat to come off as quickly as possible. This is why at nighttime, if you ever watch race cars race, you can actually see the rotors starting to glow red hot because of the heat that they're generating from the vehicle. Yeah.
Is that why sometimes, like, I know some of the new BMWs have it, in the front they have intakes that
Yep.
pull air right to the disc brake and it comes out the side?
That's the reason why.
I seen it TikTok and some guy, like, he put a little smoke machine.
Yep.
And it's cool to watch it, like, come out of the brake disc.
Yep, that's why it's there. Okay, all we're trying to do is get that heat away from the brakes as much as possible, so that way we can add more heat. Okay, so and that's allowing us to stop as fast as possible. Okay. Now the reason why we use disc brakes up in the front tires is simply because disc brakes have the capability of dissipating heat faster and more efficient than drum brakes. Okay. Now, because 60 to 70% of our braking force is occurring in the front of the vehicle, mathematically speaking, I've got 100% braking power. That leaves 30 to 40% of my braking force being allocated for the rear brakes. And because the rear brakes are not generating as much force, we can actually, quote unquote, have a much more inefficient drum brake system in the rear. Okay, and it's still going to be fine for what it is. Okay, now more modern day cars are seeing a switch over to disc brakes in the rear, just because, again, less parts, more efficient in terms of what we want from the performance side of stuff. But there's still probably a chance that if you are going to be looking at and working on brakes on a vehicle, that the rear brakes might still contain some components of a drum brake, even if it's only for a parking brake situation. Okay? But again, drum brakes hold the heat in more, so they're more susceptible to brake fade or heat fade. Alright? Alright. In our vehicles, for the longest of time, we are relying on a hydraulic system in order to engage our brakes. If you are not familiar with what hydraulics are basically the use of a liquid to transmit motion and pressure through a controlled closed system to the braking system. Now again, hydraulics are used more than just automobile stuff, but as soon as I hit that brake pedal, I need to transfer the force from that brake pedal to all four wheels. How do I do that? Through a hydraulic line system. We use liquid in order to transfer that motion and pressure and force.
So what does it do to that liquid?
Okay? The biggest thing that you need to understand in your notes right now is hydraulic system, that's what that is, but we also have to understand Pascal's law. It is a scientific principle. Pascal's law, that's the name. Okay, equals force equals pressure times the area. That's Pascal's law. It's a mathematical formula. It is a representation of how force is generated not only from the pressure that is being put into the system, but also the area in which that pressure is being applied to. Okay. Now, again, I'm not going to have you actually mathematically calculate out formulas and numbers and stuff for the test or whatnot. I just need you to understand that there is a formula out there that can allow us to know if I put 5 pounds of pressure in here, what is the expected outcome on the other end?
5 pounds of pressure back.
Right? So it depends on a bunch of different things. Okay. But again, hydraulics is the use of liquids to transmit motion and pressure undiminished, which means if I put 5 pounds of pressure in, I'm going to get 5 pounds of pressure on the other side. Okay? And the main reason for that is because liquids do not compress. Okay? Liquids do not compress. In this example, water. Water can be a liquid, right? Water does not compress.
You can't compact water.
But it can't burn.
Correct. Okay. Now you can increase the pressure of water, right? But you cannot compress it. This is a property of liquid.
Okay, so when it hit, oh, no.
All right. Again, this is overarching ideas about how this stuff functions. We're going to take these ideas and now essentially incorporate it into technology. Okay? So again, you have to keep in mind too, we'll get more into this in a second, but if I'm putting a force into my braking system, there are going to be pistons inside this mechanism here that is going to then transfer that out throughout my braking system. So it's very important you understand in a hydraulic system, it must be enclosed. If there is a leak somewhere in my hydraulic system, my force is going to come back diminished, which means I'm going to push on that brake pedal, right? Let's say I push on the brake pedal 100 pounds. 100 pounds is not getting to the brakes because I have a leak. That's not good. That's bad. Okay, so as auto technicians, we need to be trained in order to look for leaks, know what it looks like, what are the symptoms of that, okay, and how to repair it. Now again, in most cases, generally speaking, hydraulic systems are very reliable. Okay, very reliable.
Are those in newer cars or older cars?
Yes. They've been in cars for a very, very long time. You would not be able to find a vehicle that you could drive on the road that would not be hydraulic. Okay? But keep in mind too that just like how you guys might be a little intrepid to get behind a wheel of a car to have self-driving with no steering wheel, okay? When they eventually switched from basically cable braking systems to a hydraulic system, that was the biggest fear of most people. If you get a leak, you're going to crash. If you get a leak, you won't be able to stop. So a lot of people, a lot of people were very scared. They're like, no, let's use cables because that's reliable. It's never going to break, right? And there was intrepidation there.
So actually,
Where most people nowadays, you hop in a car, it's a hydraulic system. It could be negative 20 degrees outside in January, or it could be 89 degrees out in July, right? And you expect your brakes to function and work. You don't even think about it.
and they do.
Right? And they do. Very reliably, with minimal maintenance. Okay? Although there should be more maintenance. Okay? It's going to be the same thing with steering wheels. You're going to get in a car in 20, 30 years, it's not going to have a steering wheel. Right? And it's going to be able to drive better than you are. Anyways, the fluid, or the liquid that we use in our brake system is not water. Okay, and the main reason for that is because when it's negative 20 degrees outside in January, what's going to happen to that water? It's going to freeze. No longer a liquid. Can't use it in a hydraulic system. What do you think the temperatures are that's going to be occurring on a brake system?
Hot.
When you're braking?
Hot.
Let's just say north of 212 degrees, right?
Why 212?
Because what happens with water, liquid water at 212 degrees? It boils. Is it a liquid anymore when it boils?
No.
Does that mean we can actually use it in a hydraulic system?
No.
It must remain a liquid in order for us to use it. So, instead of using water, we use a very highly processed liquid called DOT 3 brake fluid. What does DOT stand for?
Department of Transportation.
Department of Transportation. Okay? The DOT has established guidelines and rules about what DOT 3 brake fluid must contain and performance-wise. Okay? DOT 3 is your most commonly used brake fluid in most domestic vehicles. Okay? So any vehicle that's typically produced in the United States, most likely going to use DOT 3. That's not 100% case, but DOT 3 is what we're going to be mostly looking at. Okay? Most European cars, Volkswagen, BMW, Audi, right? And we're starting to see some modern day domestic vehicles like Ford use DOT 4 brake fluid.
And that is?
Okay? So we might talk about what the difference is between the two, but basically DOT 4 has a higher boiling point
What's DOT
than
5?
DOT 3. DOT 5 is mostly used for race cars.
Does it have a higher freezing point then?
Lower freezing.
Lower freezing point? Not to the point where it matters. We're more interested in the boiling point. Okay?
Because freezing point is probably not an issue.
Yeah, I mean the freezing point, obviously it's going to have kind of anti-freeze properties already because it has to perform when it's excellent. But once you start hitting the brake, even when it's negative 20 degrees outside, that brake fluid is going to warm up quick. But anyways, DOT 5, that's more of a silicone-based brake fluid, and it's something that we would not see in a normal street car. This is specifically engineered mostly for race cars.
What
Okay.
happened if you put DOT 5 in your normal car?
You would ruin your braking system. Just straight up. Okay? Because of the extra silicate. Alright. You know what? Let's stop for there because we only got like 2 more minutes. We're on slide 28. The last, no, listen. The last 2 minutes here before we leave, in your notebook, I want you to open up the back side of that sheet of paper you're writing on. I want you to start to write out 2 to 3 questions about the information we talked about. Questions that you might have, that you're confused about, questions that are not clear, questions that maybe you want to dig further, okay? So on and so forth, okay? We'll end the recording here though.